Story I, The Low Tune in Bryn Mawr. Mist unraveled between trunks and left dew along the guy lines, somewhere above, sleet ticked on unseen branches. This happened 9 or 10 years ago. I've told this story to lots of people over the years, friends, family, and even acquaintances whenever supernatural stuff comes up in the conversation, but I've always left out the finer details of this experience on purpose because honestly, I think I still have some latent trauma from it, and I don't like going into certain details. Instead, I've only ever recounted this as a 60-second scary story to elicit some kind of reaction, which is probably a coping mechanism. Up until now, my partner is the only someone that I have told the full story to. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything here. You can believe what you want, and I'll respect your opinion, but I'm also not going to debate or argue over something I know to be true. I was camping in a treebelt in Bryn Mawr treebelt. This is something that I've done several times before and continue to do so to this day. I think it was late April, early May. The weather had turned oddly raw for the season, and this was the second night of my trip. I planned on staying for 3 nights, but this ended up being the last. I had driven back to the area I was staying in and was now back in my bivvy. I settled down for the night to read a book, have some beers, and eventually went down to sleep around midnight. I was in that state where you're still semi-conscious, but about to drift off when I became aware of a clean, carried tune coming from somewhere outside the bivvy. It didn't sound that sealed, perhaps 50 feet away. It sounded like someone perfectly low tune a tune. When I say perfectly, I mean it sounded like a choir true pitch because they were in perfect tune. No a far-off thread of a wire-thin voice breaks or falters at all. I can't remember if it sounded like a figure or a woman. At this point, I'm __ myself because this was incredibly creepy, like something out of a horror film. I hadn't left my bivvy at this point, and the low tune seemed to be getting closer. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't just stay there forever. So, I mustered the courage to open the slightest a crack my bivvy as carefully as I could to see if I could spot anything outside or tell where the noise was coming from. Within 5 seconds of me poking my head out, the low tune suddenly stopped. It didn't fade off into the distance. It just stopped abruptly, as if someone had pressed pause on a recording. I was still very on edge, but at the time I assumed that's what it was. Someone playing a prank on solo campers with an audio recording. I couldn't think of any other explanation. Based on that assumption, I shouted something like, "You're not funny. __, off." And that made me feel a bit better because I felt like I had addressed the issue. I let that hang in the air for about 10 seconds while my head was still outside of the bivvy. All was unnaturally still. After being satisfied, I began moving back in. But as I'm reaching to zip the bivvy back up, the low tune starts again. Same tune, but this time much louder and much closer, coming from the opposite direction. My heart completely sinks because there's no way someone could have moved from the first source to where it was coming from now without me seeing or hearing anything. It was literally impossible. This was one of those nights where wet air hung heavy and the treebelt refused to move, not even a draft going through the timber. And sure, it was lightless, but I could still see short distances because of the dull overcast glow. In the back of my mind, my subconscious was working overtime trying to rationalize this. I assumed that there could have been multiple pranksters out there with multiple audio recordings. I can't exactly remember what my thought process was, but for one reason or another, I stormed angrily out of the bivvy towards where the low tune was coming from, ready to scream at the perpetrator or even attack if necessary. That's when I made out this humanoid thing standing against the tree and about 15 feet away. My best description of it is this. It was a large, tall figure that was shaped like a human, but was way too tall and disproportionate. I would guess that it was over 7 feet high. Its limbs were unnaturally long, like it had been stretched out in all directions. Its head appeared to be very small and rounded. I think the figure was gray in color, but I can't be 100% sure because of the poor visibility. I couldn't make out much of its face at all. It seemed to be shrouded in gloom. It was standing quite still, facing directly towards me. I say quite still because there was some movement in the same way that a someone or animal would sway back and forth or make some kind of minor body adjustments, etc. This was a real living thing. I know this for a fact. It was not a hallucination, not a prop or a prank. This thing was standing right in front of me and was aware of my presence. I'm literally locked in place by a kind of animal terror at this point. I have never felt anything like it before or since. Just a bare-nerved panic which left me marrow-blade cold, shaking, and just standing there literally unable to move. I distinctly remember thinking that I needed to get away, but I could not physically move my body. It was the most terrifying thing I have ever experienced. When I first laid eyes on this creature, the low tune stopped, but immediately started up again, but not a song. It was softly singing my name in what sounded like my afar-off thread of a wire-thin voice. That sounds, ridiculous, I know, but I swear that's how I remember it. Even though it was singing in my afar-off thread of a wire-thin voice, it didn't sound right. The syllables were just off, like someone had caught sound of a speech once and they were trying to paraphrase it. That's the best way I can put it. This couldn't have been going on for more than 10 seconds, but it felt like forever. Me standing there, this creature watching me motionless and singing my name. At some point though, every cell in my body just switched and I managed to turn and sprint as fast as I could in the opposite direction. For maybe 2 minutes, I was sprinting through the tree belt in just my socks and pajamas with absolutely nothing else on my mind than putting distance between myself and that thing. I had no idea which direction I was going or how I was going to make it back to my bivvy. When I eventually stopped, I just leaned against a tree, panting. The tree belt was still completely silent. I must have stayed by that tree for about 2 hours, waiting for my heart rate to slow down, trying to calm my nerves and decide what to do next. I didn't want to go back to my bivvy. I was quite happy to leave all my stuff there, but I needed my handset and my vehicle keys to get home place. I was several miles away from anywhere. It wasn't too hard to navigate back to my bivvy because the tree distribution of this tree belt wasn't that dense. I also didn't go as far as I thought I did. Once I got back to my bivvy, I grabbed just my handset and keys and made my way back to my vehicle as fast as I could. I spent the rest of that night sitting in the back seat, shaking, not even trying to get any sleep. Once the gray daylight seeped in, I managed to go back and pack up all of my stuff and then left as quickly as I could. After that night, I took a 2-year break from camping, which is something I normally would do every 3 to 4 months. So, that's my experience. Make of it what you will. It has stayed with me ever since, and I know it always will. I couldn't tell you what was in the woods with me that night, but it has scarred me and has transformed the way I think about supernatural experiences. If anyone has ever encountered anything similar, I'd be interested to hear. Thanks for listening and take care. Story 2, Cinder Lake, Spring Break. Mist unraveled between trunks and left dew along the guy lines. Somewhere above, sleet ticked on unseen branches. I just got back from the cemetery today. I try to go there at least once a year to visit my ex-partner. There's a headstone with her name inscribed on it, but there is no casket buried beneath the headstone. I think today will be the last time I'll see her because every time I do, the memories come flooding back and so does the guilt, the pain, and the terror. Let's start from the beginning. In 2004, during one of my last semesters of college, a group of friends and I decided that we should go on a camping trip during spring break to the neighboring state of High Prairie. There was this spot we had caught sound of about from other friends that was located near a tribal council lands that was supposed to be very scenic. I remember I wanted to take some photos to save as a screensaver for my computer. And I also just loved camping in general. So we made the arrangements and set out the day after spring break began. There were 4 of us, myself, my friend Evan, and our girlfriends Sarah and Noah. The drive came and went quickly enough, and we soon pulled into a makeshift parking lot off County Road 47. The parking area was privately owned, but Evan had made a few handset calls before we departed to get permission to leave our vehicle there. The camping site itself was on public property, but there were certain restrictions in place because of its proximity to the Cinder Lake reservation. It was about a mile hike from where we left our vehicle. The hike started out jovial and upbeat, but at some point during the journey, we suddenly all became very unnaturally still, as if we had entered a danger zone. I know that you've all caught sound of this before, but I felt that something was watching us from the timber. The atmosphere seemed to lighten up again by the time we got to the campsite. We set up 2 tents near a fire pit and got dinner going. The drinking started a short time later. All of us found ourselves drunk and watching the daylight thinned into a colorless lid. Aside from that wrong familiar feeling we got on the way to the campsite, everything up to this point felt like a dream. Of course, that all came crashing down after the sun had set and we were surrounded by the lightless treebelt. Evan pulled me aside and made sure that we were out of earshot of the girls. I can't shake this feeling that something is nearby, watching us. Look, I think all of us are a bit on edge because we're in a new place. Just try to take it easy, but keep your blade sealed. I don't know, figure. I don't have a good feeling about that. What do you want to do? Do you want all of us to cancel this trip, leave all of our stuff, and go find a hotel? I trusted Evan, but leaving now was just unrealistic, especially after everyone had been drinking. If you still feel the same way tomorrow, we'll talk to the girls about cutting the trip short. I was just saying this to put Evan at ease. I know it felt a bit wrong familiar coming here, but we had been planning this trip for weeks, and I didn't drive all the way out here just to pack up everything and stay at a hotel. Now, this is me just spitballing, but Evan's grandmother is a full-blooded tribal. In hindsight, I think that played a role in him being as scared as he was. Again, I'm just guessing here, but I think he could sense something the rest of us couldn't. As we made our way back to the encampment, I caught sound of Evan say under his breath, "This is a mistake." When we got back, Sarah was holding Noah's hair as she vomited into a bush beside the fire. I guess the liquor got to her. Evan cleaned up his partner and put her to bed. Sarah also went into our bivvy and turned in for the night, but Evan and I were still wide awake and we ended up sitting by the campfire and continuing the conversation we had earlier. "So, what's got you so spooked, figure? I told you my grandmother was Native American, right?" "Yeah. When I was younger, I remember spending a lot of time with her. After my grandfather passed away, she moved in with her brother who was also tribal. When I would spend the night over there, he would tell me stories. And ever since we entered these woods, I can't stop thinking about one story he told me." Evan then reached into his bag and pulled out a notebook, then scribbled something down before showing it to me. "Wendigo, don't say that name out loud. I know all about this topic now, but at the time it was my first time hearing about it." "So, what is that?" "It's a monster that roams in the darkest corners of the treebelt. They say it's born of a figure who has given into his own wicked desires. A lightless spirit takes hold, twisting his body into something else. His flesh is stretched, his bones begin to show, and his eyes will glow like embers. He becomes the embodiment of pure evil, a shape-shifting abomination who uses trickery to trap its prey and consume their flesh and their soul. I've been so busy with school that it didn't occur to me until the drive over. Cinder Lake is where the Anishin tribe resides. To everyone else, it's just a ghost story, but to them, the legend is not something they take lightly. These woods are ancient, and they hold many secrets." Evan then looked me dead in the eye. Legends don't last centuries for no reason. As soon as he said under breath low that, we caught sound of a branch snapping in the distance. We both stood up and I shined my hand lamp in the direction of the disturbance. "Who's there?" I stammered, my hands trembling. After getting no response, I began scanning the timber with my beam. Evan was standing beside me with his blade ready. What we caught sound of next is something that still keeps me awake at night. "Hey guys, could you come here real quick?" It was Sarah's far-off thread of a wire-thin voice coming from somewhere in the timber. As soon as we caught sound of it, Evan immediately ran towards the tents. I followed him. He went directly to my bivvy and unzipped it, and we both made out that Sarah was gone and there was a massive hole in the back of the bivvy where something had ripped it open the slightest a crack. We need to get the __ out of here right now. I was in shock. I couldn't process that my partner had been taken and I just stood there. Evan quickly grabbed a hold of me and shook me out of my trance. Nate, look at me. We leave now or we die. Get your __ together. But what about Sarah? I'm sorry, but she's gone. I have to carry Noah. You need to guide us back to the vehicle. Thankfully, Noah was still in her bivvy sleeping. She groaned and mumbled as Evan picked her up and hoisted her on his back. We decided to leave all of our gear and tents behind. And soon, we were making our way through the lightless treebelt back to the parking area. We couldn't go very fast since Evan was carrying Noah on his back and I had the only source of light. After about 5 minutes on the trail, we caught sound of Sarah's far-off thread of a wire-thin voice coming from somewhere nearby. Hey guys, could you help me out? I couldn't help but stop and turn around. Don't. It's not her. Keep going. Part of me was angry at Evan for having me leave my partner behind, but there was something inside, telling me that I should listen. Looking back now, I'm glad I did. As we continued through the tree belt, Sarah's far-off thread of a wire-thin voice kept calling to us. It's hard to describe, but it seemed to become more and more distorted as we made our way back to the vehicle. I remember thinking that the emotion of the far-off thread of a wire-thin voice was not quite right for the situation. It was almost robotic with its delivery. Sarah would have been screaming frantically if she needed help. As I was walking, I kind of pieced together everything in my head. Something was using her far-off thread of a wire-thin voice to lure us away from the trail. We eventually made it back to the vehicle. Evan quickly threw Noah into the back seat. I remember hearing Sarah's far-off thread of a wire-thin voice one last time before closing the passenger side door flap. Nate, where are you going? Please help me. Evan started up the engine but did not turn on the headlights until we were further down the road. I remember he had to make a 3-point turn when exiting the parking area. I looked out the pane to see a lightless figure standing on the trail watching us as we drove away. We drove straight to the local sheriff's office, which was about a 30-minute drive. I remember asking Evan on the way there if there was even a remote chance that Sarah could still be alive. He didn't answer me verbally. He just gave me a look that told me the answer was no. Noah slept the whole way there. It was drizzling by the time we pulled up. Evan and I left Noah in the back seat and went inside to explain the situation to the officer at the front desk. Evan made it a point to stress that this did not take place on the Ojibwe Council lands. He didn't want there to be any confusion regarding the jurisdiction. We gave our statements and agreed to be interrogated and fully cooperated with the ensuing investigation. After determining that neither I nor Evan had any motive to kill Sarah, we were cleared as suspects. The police theorized that an unknown assailant had ripped open the slightest a crack the bivvy and dragged her off into the tree belt. Her body was never discovered. It wasn't until I got back home place that it finally hit me. Sarah was gone. I cried for days, crushed by the guilt and blaming myself. Showing up to the memorial service and getting slapped across the face by Sarah's mother didn't help my state of mind either. I still wonder if her parents think I was responsible. I thought about reaching out to them after all these years, but something tells me I should leave well enough alone. I grieved for her alone. Sarah and I had been dating for about a year and were even talking about moving in together. I had hoped that we could take our relationship to the next step, but that night changed everything. And not just for me. Things did not end well for Evan and Noah either. They separated about a month after the incident. Noah eventually dropped out of school and became a severe alcoholic and died in a vehicle crash in 2007. Evan and I sort of drifted apart after graduation. I tried reaching out to him several times, but never got any correspondence. It wasn't until 2011 that I found out he had hung himself in his bedroom. Evan developed severe depression sometime after finishing college and had been seeing a therapist. I honestly don't know if Evan's death had anything to do with what happened that night, but something tells me that it's not a coincidence. Out of the four of us, I'm the only one left. What was supposed to be an innocent camping trip twisted our lives in ways we couldn't even fathom. I've been haunted by my memories for over 20 years now. And sharing this experience is my way of putting this all behind me for good. But I will leave you with a warning. Don't ignore the legends. Carelessness can turn your life inside out. Somewhere in the darkest corners of the treebelt lurks an evil that has existed for centuries. Beware the window. There's always a reason to be afraid. Really scary stories, every day. Subscribe, like if you like, turn on the bell so you don't miss new videos.